There's no indication in the original stories that he was asexual or gay. He actually says he declines the attention of women because he doesn't want the distraction. What does that tell you about him? If he was asexual, there would be no tension in that, no fun in that. It's someone who abstains who's interesting.
Hi, I'm Blue Sue, and I've got opinions on current asexual representation. Queer representation. We know it, we have mixed feelings on it, we go to war, fight to the death about it, we write fanfiction about it. Now listen, bad queer representation is not a new topic, and bad asexual representation isn't a new topic either. For those in the community, ace or not, you might have already heard about how underrepresented we are, how we're the invisible orientation. And this combined with the fact that being uninterested in sex is associated in media with nerdiness or generally unpleasant or distant personality or depicted as something that can be cured. It's a little bit of a mess, I'm not gonna lie to you. But this video isn't about that. We can talk all we want about the Sheldons and Houses of the world, but the real interest I have for you is in media where the queer representation isn't actually too bad. Media that actually strives to be good representation for the queer community, and might have actually succeeded.
Yeah, but Sue, if the queer representation in the media you're talking about isn't that bad, then why are you talking about it?
Excuse me.
Well, my dear viewer, that's a very good question. And it stems from the fact that most shows, even ones with good queer representation, tend to drop the ball when it comes to asexual rep. From barely acknowledging the representation in the show, if at all, to well-intentioned and yet in spite of it, stereotypical depictions. It's not looking great out here, champ. So I've decided to take a look at some of the media I enjoy and look closer at how asexual people are represented. Because at the end of the day, we can't get better at representation unless we recognize where the problems lie and why we might have these problems to begin with. A couple things before we get into it though. With one exception, all the characters I'm talking about here are going to be canonically confirmed as asexual. No headcanons or anything. And when I say canonical confirmation, I mostly mean word of God confirmation from the creator themselves, whether in the show itself or outside of it. Another thing is that all these characters are going to be taken from the pool of what I watch, and I don't watch a lot of live action shows. I'm getting better, I promise! So if there's any asexual characters you think I missed, feel free to talk about them and show me how depressingly narrow the pool of stuff I watch truly is. But with all that being said, let's take a look at asexual representation and see what trends we might pick up on. With this video, I split all the stuff I'll be talking about into 4 sections that I think represent their depictions of asexuality, depending on how visible the ace representation is. But we're gonna be starting off a little bit weird here because this section only has one show in it. And Steven! So, I'm a Steven Universe fan. Yeah, shut the hell up. Steven Universe is a Cartoon Network show created by Rebecca Sugar in 2014 about the titular Steven Universe and his family of gemstone space aliens. But as much as I like it, Steven Universe is a weird show when it comes to its asexual representation. Don't get me wrong, overall the show has great representation when it comes to queerness. In fact, great is kind of underplaying it. The show was downright revolutionary for its time. It paved the way for shows to depict queerness later down the line. But unfortunately, I'm hard-pressed to call the asexual rep in Steven Universe good, considering the Schrodinger's cat of representation we have with Peridot. Peridot is aro ace. Kind of. Whilst we do have a storyboarder who worked on the show confirming that she was intended to be aromantic and asexual, we also have a storyboarder who says that Lapidot was the intention when writing it. And when we look at the mouth of Rebecca Sugar themselves, we get ambiguity.
I was visiting home and I had a really illuminating conversation with a friend of mine who is Aroace, and I thought because of the complicated backstories in relation to fusion, with Lapis and with Peridot, that it should also be totally acceptable for a character to not want to fuse.
Whilst this quote is validating for people who read Peridot as asexual, especially a sex-repulsed asexual, and Rebecca Sugar says that they were inspired by an Aroace friend to write this still falls short of an actual confirmation. It's an implication more than anything else. The other issue here with Steven Universe's quote-unquote asexual representation is that even if Peridot was confirmed to be asexual, she's kind of a stereotype. The emotionally distant intellectual nerd is a pretty common trope that tends to be associated with people who are uninterested in sex or relationships, and by extension aromantic and asexual people. The association comes from a couple different places. The emotionally distant part being linked to how aros and aces are seen as lacking in other human emotions, and the nerd part coming from the idea that we don't engage with sex or romance because we focus on our work or studies. And yes, whilst Peridot is a multifaceted character who feels emotion and stuff, she's still pretty emblematic of the trope. It's nice that in later seasons she's a lot more enthusiastic about things and more openly emotive, but it still feels like it's fitting into the nerd trope without doing anything to expand on it explicitly. In fact, you could even say that if a lack of sexual attraction is linked with a lack of emotions, then the idea of a character arc where an asexual becomes more openly emotive over time feels a little bit unintentionally reflective of some narratives people have about asexual and aromantic people needing to be converted or fixed because of their lack of attraction. And this will be an arc we'll be seeing a lot in the future. So, she's bad rep? She's ambiguous? She sucks? Throw her down the pit? Well, not exactly. In Season 2, Episode 26, Log Date 7152, Peridot is put somewhat at odds with Garnet, a gem fusion who tends to be the gem's romantic advice therapist. Garnet, in a lot of ways, is the embodiment of romantic love in the show. She's a fusion between two gems in a romantic relationship, and it's clear that she has a lot of reverence for the subject. Peridot, on the other hand, doesn't understand it at all. She doesn't understand how two gems could be in a fusion for so long for no discernible reason, with her only real understanding of romance coming from shipping. For all intents and purposes, Garnet shouldn't have any understanding of Peridot at all, and in a lesser show, she wouldn't. But then she says this.
We're very different. I appreciate that.
Really?
In the context of Garnet being a very romantic person and Peridot being not that, this is a very powerful line. For a character like Garnet to not brush away the significance of that difference but still appreciate it, it feels good. It's a nice acknowledgement. And that's why the fact that Peridot is never really outright confirmed to be aromantic or asexual is a little bit disappointing to me. Sure, it wouldn't have been the best representation, again, Peridot is a stereotype, but it would have been nice. It would have been nice if Peridot's orientation wasn't just another thing up to interpretation. I'm not saying they had to drop everything to say Peridot was an aromantic asexual on screen in front of everyone at my high school. That would have been kind of awkward and probably wouldn't have even been feasible at the time. But maybe having a concrete vision of Peridot's orientation could have given us more moments like this, that show rather than tell who Peridot is. But whatever, the scene is still well written and Peridot is always Arrow Ace in my heart. And even if Peridot isn't explicitly Arrow Ace, it's still a neat step forward in potentially having better representation later down the line. So, what did we get down the line? Oh. Welcome, ladies, gents, and whatever the equivalent gender ambiguous word is, to what's probably gonna be the longest section in this video. Off-screen asexual representation is when a character's asexuality is confirmed off-screen, not in the text itself. And this is the most common representation we've got. So let's start off with a relatively simple one. Lackadaisy is a 2023 indie animated show created by Tracy Butler that started off as a comic released in July 2006. This comic is older than I am. Now, Lackadaisy is a show I don't want to be too harsh on, considering it's not technically a show yet. As of writing this, only the pilot has been released, and whilst the comic is available to read, I have not read it. For all I know, this story could have the greatest asexual representation to ever grace my eyes. But for now, let's discuss Mordecai. Mordecai was confirmed by Tracy Butler to be asexual in a post wherein she says that he's somewhere within the ace spectrum, but in another post implies that his romantic orientation is left up to interpretation. But thing number one, Mordecai runs into the same problem as Peridot, wherein he's also the emotionally distant intellectual stereotype. He's consistently portrayed as a perpetually pissed off, serious, and refined character, and whilst he does clearly feel things, these are very repressed, and whoops, that's the setup for the arc of an asexual where they learn to be more emotionally cognizant. We're 2 for 2 here, going strong. The second thing is the obvious one, that being that this is not confirmed in the show itself, and from what I've gathered isn't confirmed in the comics either. Now again, this isn't really something I want to criticize too harshly on Lackadaisy's part, considering the show is only 1 episode right now, and the main priorities for a pilot should be setting up the characters and introducing us to the world, which it does really well. And since this is an adaptation, it's likely we'll get more on Mordecai later down the line, and who knows, we might get explorations of his orientation. It's always a possibility. So then, why bring this all up? What's the point if there's not enough here to criticize? Well, I bring up Lackadaisy because the way it depicts asexuality here is something I want to establish as part of a trend when it comes to asexual characters. It would have been pretty easy to have confirmed at least one other character who doesn't fit the repressed nerd stereotype, but there was a decision to have Mordecai, and only Mordecai, fill the asexual role, which I feel is significant to bring up. I don't want to say the writers of Lackadaisy were being outwardly malicious when doing this, but that to make the only asexual character so far in the show be this stereotype feels like part of an unconscious bias that affects the ways that people see asexuals. And speaking of that unconscious bias, Welcome to the club, Lilith. The Owl House, created by Dana Terrace, is another example of a show that has fantastic, even revolutionary queer representation that still fumbles the ball on the asexual front. Lilith is once again a refined, serious, and nerdy character with repressed emotions that become opened up over time. While she does show emotions like enthusiasm over Ida joining her early on, it's still generally the stereotype. Like, I'm sorry to the aromantic or asexual people who like her, but I'm just saying, if I were to pick the most stereotypical option for an Arrow Ace character in the Owl House cast, it would be Lilith.
Yes, I am a nerd, bookworm. I'm studious, from my cerebral cortex to my gluteus.
Lilith is confirmed to be Arrow Ace in an audio clip of her writing a letter to Hootie released on a livestream in 2022.
I am not so interested. I don't think I ever have been.
I do have to give the Owl House its due since this is way better than just getting a Tumblr post or tweet, but when listening to the audio, it kind of feels generic? I don't know, maybe I'm going bananas or something, but the way Lilith talks about realizing her own lack of interest in romance feels less like a real Arrow Ace person coming to terms with their identity and more like a PSA. Like the dialogue came from the handbook of how to properly represent Arrow Ace people. And I don't know, again, not to discourage Arrow Ace people who like her representation, but for me personally, it's not really that compelling or even that relatable. The 5-minute clip spends less than a minute on the subject, and it's just her talking about rejecting a love interest with not that much to it. And I get it, this is a short audio clip, it's not like they're gonna get into the vast and intricate world of aromantic and asexual insecurities. But I do feel that even with a short time limit, a person more familiar with aromanticism or asexuality could have nailed down something a little bit more specific for Lilith. Hire me, Dana. Another thing that I do find a little strange about the depiction of Arrow Aceness here, though, is the fact that Lilith seems to be a little bit taken aback by and unsure of her identity, considering that the Boiling Isles is said to be entirely without explicit homophobia or transphobia.
I wanted this world to be free of homophobia, free of transphobia.
I have much to think about.
Now, okay, I do get that it's a little difficult to confirm a character's aromanticism or asexuality compared to being trans or gay, since those identities are confirmed with the presence of something, whilst Arrow Aceness is confirmed with a lack of it. But if we wanted to keep up the all queer identities are normalized in the Boiling Isles thing, it would have been relatively easy to just have Lilith confidently say she wasn't interested in this sort of thing. The fact that Lilith is unsure could have been an interesting world-building detail the show would have explored later on, but unfortunately, we're not gonna get that, are we? So for now, this detail kind of sticks out like a sore thumb to me. If I am to be a little unfair, the reason for this could be that in the general public conscious, hell, even in the general queer community conscious, a world wherein aromanticism and asexuality are normalized might be harder to imagine, considering that amatonormativity isn't really something that's being popularly contested on a mainstream scale yet. I don't want to say for sure this is why Arrow Aceness isn't normalized in the Boiling Isles. I don't know the creators of the Owl House, and I want to give the benefit of the doubt, but it is an idea to chew on. But alright, enough dunking on the Owl House. It's bad for my morale. What's next on the chopping block? Oh no. This is a messy one. So, Arcane is a Netflix animated show based on the video game League of Legends, and its asexual representation is, well, it's a complicated soup. Victor, a Zonite inventor, was confirmed to be asexual after the show ended, and look at that, we got our fourth emotionally distant intellectual asexual. Now, Victor might actually be the worst example we have of this trope, considering he literally becomes an emotionally distant eldritch god thing who needs Jace to come and smack the humanity back into him. He is admittedly a little bit different from the characters I talked about before, because he does act pretty amicably for the majority of Season 1, but his arc in Season 2 is not a good look. And then there's the fact that as Victor is a disabled person, the decision to make him, and only him, asexual could play into some really harmful ideas of disabled people being inherently undesirable or non-sexual. That's not to say that asexual disabled people don't exist, but this combined with the fact that Victor's asexuality isn't really explored in any meaningful way within the text and also conforms to asexual stereotypes, yeah, it's not hard to see why people might think the worst. Maybe you could circumvent these issues if you had more than just one asexual character in your text. I don't know, I'm just saying. And alright, I think it's time to address the yaoi-sized elephant in the room here, because one of the big reasons why this specific example of ace representation is so messy is how it overlaps with Javik. Javik is an incredibly popular ship between the two characters Jace and Victor that had been going strong right up until the end of the show, and is still one of the most popular Arcane ships now. But after the show ended, Arcane co-creator Christian Link came out with this statement.
To me, Victor was always asexual, and that was always something we talked about from the very beginning, so a romantic relationship between Jace and Victor was just never part of it.
Now, this is kind of suspicious. For one, asexuality doesn't necessarily negate the possibility of a romantic relationship, and to use it in that way is inaccurate. Asexuals are completely capable of having romantic relationships and feeling romantic attraction, just like aromantic people are capable of feeling sexual attraction and having sex. In fact, sometimes asexuals do have sex, and some aromantic people do get into relationships. And so for Link to use asexuality to invalidate the Javik relationship is a fundamental misunderstanding of what asexuality is, and tells me that he does not know a lot about this identity. This is Arrowways 101, get with the program. But the second thing here that a lot of people picked up on is that this was confirmed at the end of the show and at a peak in Javik popularity. If this was always the plan for Victor's character, then why was it only being confirmed now, after the show is already over, and not during or, and this is a bold concept, within the actual show itself? The theory that Link confirmed Victor's asexuality in an attempt to invalidate the Javik relationship, while something I'll admit I'm not fully sure is true, is one where I can understand why people believe in it, especially considering that if this was always the plan for Victor's character, you'd think the writers would have done the barest amount of research for it. And if true, this would be incredibly scummy. Now, when I say this next part, I want all the Javik shippers to lower their pitchforks and settle down. Get a heated blanket, have some yogurt, relax, it's gonna be okay. Mwah. Because as much as I empathize with the anger with what Link said, as much as I believe that Victor's asexuality was badly handled and not great representation, I have an issue with how the fandom handled this news. A lot of the fandom's reaction consisted of very well thought out critiques of how Victor's representation was handled and how it could be used to invalidate Javik, but it also consisted of a lot of people saying that Victor couldn't be asexual, that it was wrong, that it shouldn't be treated as canon. There was a lot of stuff about how, well, Victor can't be asexual, look at how sexy he is, look at the homoerotic tension, look, he made a sex joke, asexuals can't make sex jokes, they don't even know what that is. And the seemingly immediate call to disprove and invalidate Victor's asexuality kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because although it's true that Victor's asexuality wasn't handled very well, people rehabilitate underdeveloped characters all the time. People make completely different interpretations of queer identities all the time. That's part of what fandom is, that's part of what queer readings are. Considering that asexuality is such an underrepresented identity, the opportunity was ripe and ready for people to make completely different interpretations of Victor based on this news. You didn't even need to give up your favorite ship for this. Make demisexual or queer platonic Javik comics. Write conversations about what it might be like to be an asexual in a relationship with a non-asexual. Fuck it, write a fanfic where Jace is asexual too. The world is beautiful and ripe with ideas for cool depictions of asexual Victor. And for people to just throw out the idea completely, reject it on principle, throw it out the window, it was a little disheartening to see. I saw you guys make entire personalities for the Saja boys. I know you can make asexual Victor work somehow. And listen, I'm sure there are people out there who made cool asexual Victor stuff in the fandom out there somewhere, but the initial reaction to this news by the Arcane fandom still sticks out to me. What made asexuality such an offensive concept for so many people? What made it feel like such a threat? And this is why not including explicit asexual representation within your show is a real issue. If asexual representation can only exist outside of the text, then not only does it not allow for any actual meaningful depictions of asexuality or any of the visibility that is supposed to be the goal, but it can also leave room for your audience to not take you as seriously when it comes to the character's orientation. Whilst normalization of asexuality without it needing to be mentioned can be helpful and sometimes even good, asexuality is so often never mentioned that we need a change. So what about the media that does mention it? Hey, I need your attention. Give me like a minute of your time here. You're watching my videos, I know you have it. First off, thank you for watching my video and getting this far. I always appreciate it. But give me a moment here to very quickly talk to you about the Shikuri Project. The Shikuri Project is a non-profit organization with the goal of providing diagnoses and medication to kids with sickle cell disease in Kenya. For those who don't know, sickle cell disease is a blood disorder that affects the shape of your red blood cells. You know how red blood cells are shaped like this so they can effectively carry oxygen through the bloodstream? With sickle cell disease, the red blood cells become shaped like, well, sickles, which are much less efficient in carrying oxygen and can block blood flow. Sickle cell disease can be really painful and might lead to kidney failure, strokes, and sepsis. A lot of people die because they're either undiagnosed or don't have access to the medication, especially kids under the age of 5. So please donate what you can to the Shikuri Project or share them online. $50 helps diagnose one child, and $100 gives medication for a year, but any amount will build up and help a lot. The QR code's on screen and there will be a link to the PayPal in the description. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the video. Alright, we finally reached the bare minimum. What a journey it's been to get here. For this section, I'm going to be talking about texts that do mention their character's asexuality within the show, with the caveat being that it's barely mentioned or brought up. So let's start this section off strong. Oh boy. Now, if you're new to this channel, hi, nice to meet you, thank you for coming. And let's just say I have complicated feelings about this show. But in spite of all of that, Hazbin Hotel is actually one of the better shows when it comes to its rep because it actually mentions it and brings it up multiple times within the show. Yay. In Season 1, Episode 7, Hello Rosie, Alastor is confirmed to be asexual by Rosie, saying,
I know you're an ace in the hole. A what now?
Now this runs into the same issue as Victor in that Rosie is saying this in response to the idea that Alastor might be dating Charlie and is therefore conflating aromanticism and asexuality. But hey, at least it's mentioned in the show, and Alastor's discomfort with sex is referenced throughout. Again, asexual doesn't necessarily mean being uncomfortable with sex, but with Alastor it does seem to be the case. So is the representation any good? I've heard a lot of conflicting opinions on Alastor from asexual people. Some people appreciate he's a conventionally attractive character with an energetic showman personality, which not a ton of asexual characters tend to be. But the fact that he's a serial killer, apathetic to the feelings of others, might also roam into stereotypical territory. As for me, I have conflicted feelings on him as asexual representation, but my main issue with him kind of just boils down to my issue with asexual representation generally, that being that it's barely mentioned. We get one offhand mention of it and a couple references to his discomfort with sex, and that's about it. And I'm not sure if this really counts as meaningful asexual rep. There's a lot you can do with a man from the 1930s who doesn't understand his own sexuality yet, but we don't really get any of that. Hold it! Recently there's been news about Season 3 where Vivzy Pop says that Alastor's identity will be explored in the future. Personal opinion, this is pretty cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. We'll see what happens, I don't know. Okay, back to the actual video. And because it's only barely mentioned in the show, we run into the Victor issue with people trying to disprove or ignore it. But this time, it's worse on the fandom side because we don't have the weird JVic asexual yaoi cauldron suit mess. There's no reason to doubt or reinterpret Alastor's asexuality here, and whilst he's not explicitly stated to be sex repulsed, he basically is, come on guys. He repeatedly shows disinterest and disgust in sex or being touched, and there's no evidence to suggest he's in any way favorable towards sex. If you want to learn more about the Hazbin Hotel fandom reaction to Alastor's asexuality, I definitely recommend Misty Sparkles and Crispy Tavern's videos on it, since they go a lot more in depth than I have the time for here. But to summarize, it seems to be a common trend wherein fandoms will act hostile to aromantic and asexual characters in the fear that it'll threaten their favorite ships. It even got stronger in Season 2 because of the whole Alastor and Vox thing, despite there being even more evidence that he's just not into that, and that's more than a little bit disappointing. But hey, that's enough Hazbin Hotel on this channel for the next decade. What else have we got on the list? Oh man, the Magnus Archives. The Magnus Archives is a 2016 horror podcast created by Jonathan Sims starring the protagonist, Jonathan Sims. Yes, they have the same name, and yes, it's incredibly confusing. But the Magnus Archives is genuinely one of my favorite works of art ever. It's not perfect, but it's got some of the most intelligent writing and character building I've come across in a long time. The world building is compelling, the voice actors are acting their asses off, the characters are well developed and intriguing, and they even managed to get in a queer relationship that is written so well it literally feels like queerbait. I have nothing but respect for the incredibly talented Jonathan Sims, the creator, and all the work he's done. And that's why it pains me greatly to say this about the Magnus Archives, but the asexual representation here is mid.
Wait, just give me a second.
John Sims, the character, is confirmed to be asexual in Season 3, Episode 106, A Matter of Perspective, by John's colleague Melanie, who says that according to John's ex, John doesn't have sex.
Like, at all.
Wowie zowie, we got the rep. The problem here is the same as Hazbin Hotel in that it's barely mentioned, but somehow worse than Hazbin Hotel because this is literally the only reference we get to John's asexuality in the entire podcast, and he's not even in the room to acknowledge it. And that's doubly bad when we realize that John is yet another emotionally distant intellectual nerd. He is a serious smart man who is hostile to almost everyone until emotionally opening up later in the series. And up she goes. And this is really disappointing with how good the rest of the queer representation is. I have nothing but respect for this series and its creators, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't let down by this aspect of it. I do want to be a bit kinder to both of these shows, considering that it is pretty cool that they were able to mention their characters' orientations within the show, but this can't be the blueprint going forward for representation. It's just simply not enough. This can't be the standard. So what should the standard be? Alright, you already know he was gonna be here. Let's get him out of the way. Todd Chavez from BoJack Horseman.
This is my own private domicile and I will not be harassed! Bitch!
Todd has long been considered the golden standard of asexual representation, considering that not only is he canonically asexual, not only is it mentioned within the show, but the show actually explores what it means to be asexual and some of the struggles that might come with it? Impossible. Todd is a hetero-romantic asexual who was alluded to being ace in Season 3 until being outright confirmed in Season 4. Todd goes through a lot in relation to his asexuality, with episodes dedicated to trying to be in a relationship with a person who wants sex when he doesn't, to trying to hide his asexuality from his girlfriend's hypersexual family, to generally trying to find people like him and coming to terms with being asexual whilst also wanting a romantic relationship. And it's all pretty great. All the information is accurate and the stories are well told, whilst also allowing them to be completely over the top and ridiculous like everything else in BoJack Horseman. And it's also nice that Todd is not the serious stoic one here. In fact, he's probably one of the least serious people in the entire show. It can be argued that Todd's personality might play into some stereotypes about asexuals being kind of childlike and immature, but the show remedies this by having other asexuals in the show with different personalities, and also, I'm gonna be so real, I kinda don't care. Todd is literally one of the only examples we have of actual meaningful representation. Who am I to nitpick? You've been nitpicking this whole video. Shut up! But here's where I'd run into a problem, because as good as Todd's representation is, as validating as it was to see him be openly asexual on screen and deal with uniquely asexual struggles, I can't relate to him. A lot of Todd's struggles are about the experience of being a romantically interested asexual, and that's just something I've never really had to experience as an aerospec person. And that's not really a problem in and of itself. The asexual community isn't a monolith, and it makes total sense that not everyone would relate to Todd. That's not really the fault of BoJack Horseman. The problem here is that if Todd is the golden standard of asexual representation and has been one of the only examples of good, meaningful, mainstream representation that we have had for the last 5 years, then this isn't enough. I feel like a lot of people underestimate how large the asexual community actually is. Because yeah, whilst we only make up about 1% of the global population, although being real, it's probably more, we are incredibly diverse and will have very different experiences based on whether or not we have or like sex, whether or not we feel romantic attraction, race, gender, class, whether or not we're disabled, whether or not our sexualities overlap with any other queer identities. There are so many ways in which a person's relationship with their asexuality might differ from another's. My experience as a sex-repulsed asexual who's never been in a relationship will be incredibly different from an asexual who regularly has sex or a person who has been in a relationship. It will be different based on a bunch of different factors that exist within both of our lives. And on top of that, we all just straight up have different personalities. Even if a person falls into all the identity groups of another person, they'll still be completely different people. Asexuals can literally be anyone. And to have all that diversity, all these different experiences, all these different relationships and reactions to and ways of coping and struggling with asexuality to be condensed down and channeled into the singular character that is Todd, it's just not going to work. He can't bear all that responsibility, look at him! And to be completely honest, Todd is probably the most consumable and accessible asexual character we have. He's white, he's hetero-romantic, he's cis, and he's a dude. And listen, this isn't to dunk on any of my white, straight, cis male asexual siblings. I'm just saying that we need more than this. Todd is great, but he can't represent everyone forever. So, that's it? The one example of asexual representation you actually like, and you still can't relate to it? All of those YouTube asexual representation video essay breakdowns with this guy in the thumbnail and nothing? Is there literally any asexual representation that you actually like with no pretenses? What is this? What's happening? What's wrong with you? What's going on? I can't hold it in any longer. I have to do it. I need to do it. I need to talk about him. I need everyone to know about him. I need the world to know about.
Welcome back to Fantasy High. My name is Brandon Lee Mulligan. These are our Intrepid Heroes. Say hi, Intrepid Heroes.
Hi, Intrepid Heroes.
So, this is Fantasy High. Fantasy High is a D&D roleplay show released by Dropout in 2018, and follows the adventures of 6 D&D characters going to high school in a modern yet magical world over the course of 3 seasons, of which I've only seen 2 because junior year is not on YouTube yet. This was a show that on my first watch I had a lot of fun with. The role-playing is great, all the players are incredibly funny and do a great job of selling their characters, and Brandon Lee Mulligan is an absolutely fantastic dungeon master. I am jealous of this man's ability to come up with such witty dialogue on the fly like he does. But as I started watching, one character started to stick out to me. My darling, my beloved, it's Riz Gukgak. Riz is a little teenage goblin with a knack for being a detective, and whilst he is one of 2 of the designated smart ones in the group, he is also just the dumbest person alive. What other character would willingly and enthusiastically jump into the hole of a giant mass of sentient corn whilst getting almost absolutely nothing out of it? Who else would walk around a high school with a briefcase filled with stupid business cards for making friends and also somehow a gun? Despite initially being my least favorite out of the main 6 characters, he very quickly became my favorite guy of them all. And that's why I was super psyched when I found found out he was also asexual. Sure, it was an off-screen confirmation on an episode of a different show that I never got to see, but hey, if you're gonna have an off-screen confirmation, then it might as well be for the one who's already my favorite. But then I got to season 2, and that's when things started to get queer. Riz's arc in Fantasy High Season 2 is undeniably aromantic and asexual. Like, it's not even subtle. This is not subtext, this is quite literally the text. Riz starts off this season as an awful workaholic, as he usually does. But as the season goes on, we start to break down why Riz is like this to begin with. Riz is deeply insecure and has always felt disconnected from the rest of the world, and works on his adventures in order to connect to the people around him in the only way he knows how. Even with the new friends he has now, he still feels like he can't connect to them on certain levels, to the point where he lies about having a romance partner called Baron after his friends chide him for not being interested in romance.
What's their name?
Baron.
Baron from the Baron.
Hot name for a girl or a guy.
Yeah.
And this is something that can be really relatable for a lot of aromantic and asexual people. To lie about having an interest in romance or sex in order to fit in is a very real thing that a lot of people do, especially since lacking an interest in these things isn't something that's normalized. Adding this relatively comedic scene with Riz fumbling to come up with a romance partner would have already passed like 3 sections of this video, but things get even better when Baron, the representation of Riz's amatonormativity, comes to life to torture him. I don't think you're getting how cool this is. Fantasy High made a villain that represents an aromantic asexual's coping mechanism of living in a world that prioritizes sex and romance. You just don't see this. You just don't see this weaving of asexual and aromantic struggles with actual plot devices and character arcs. And by the end of the season, Riz is able to confront his fears over being different from his friends and family. He's able to overcome the insecurities over himself that Baron represents by learning to trust the people around him and letting go of the idea that work is integral to his value as a person, and finally learning how to fucking take a nap. Oh my god, it's just so good. But Sue, isn't Riz a nerd? Didn't you spend the entire video critiquing making asexual characters nerds? Yes, I did! But I'm gonna be honest, I straight up don't even care about that when it comes to Riz, because him being a nerd is used to explore his asexuality and aromanticism in nuanced ways, which the other characters I mentioned either weren't able to or just didn't. And there are a lot of other things that make Riz's representation so much cooler. He's able to have a conversation with his dad with reference to this part of himself, and his dad accepts him in an incredibly sweet and heartfelt scene. And generally, I'm just a big fan of how, despite Riz not seeming to be interested in romance or sex, he has a huge fixation over the party fighter elf Fabian. I find their friendship super wholesome. It's just nice to see an Arrow Ace character be portrayed as unabashedly affectionate like this. Personally, I see it as a QPR, and that's because I'm right. But the truth of why I like him so much in comparison to almost every other character on this list is simply because he explicitly reflects uniquely asexual and even aromantic experiences. I could care less that he's a nerd or that they don't say the word asexual in the show. What truly mattered to me above all else was that the people behind Fantasy High took the time to learn about what it was like to be us and integrate that into the show with care. Steven Universe experimented with that a bit, but this show, along with BoJack Horseman, were the ones who followed through on it. Not everyone will relate to him, but I do. So why? Why did I have to look to a relatively niche roleplay series to find the representation I had been looking for and to finally feel seen in the way I wanted? Why is asexual representation so hard to find to begin with, and why does it feel so samey, so surface level? And why is there this small, tingling feeling that some people don't want to write about us? Well, let's take a look at a certain other queer detective. If he was asexual, there would be no tension in that, no fun in that. It's someone who abstains who's interesting. This is a quote from Stephen Moffat, co-creator of the BBC Sherlock show released in 2010. It comes from a 2012 Guardian interview wherein Moffat is asked about the most vexing mystery, Sherlock's sex life. And the sentiment that Moffat expresses here, I'm not gonna mince words, it's bad. It's really, really bad. Shut up! The idea that if Sherlock was asexual, he would be boring, and that asexuality, and by extension aromanticism, is an inherently boring thing to be is an incredibly hurtful idea. To say that in all its diversity and unique experiences, in all the ways that being aromantic or asexual affects the way we experience the world, to say that all of us and our experiences are boring, I'm gonna be frank, this sucks. I hope aphobia drowns in salt and burns in fucking hell. And yet it is an idea that persists in the public consciousness, from writers' rooms to internet fandom spaces, because people are used to the idea that romance and sex are the most incredible, interesting, awesome things on the planet, and that the people who don't participate in that or simply don't share the same interest are nerdy, boring, lonely prudes. Why do you think the word virgin is used as an insult? And I don't really know what to do about this. Although I've been harsh in this video, I don't think that anyone behind the texts I've mentioned is aphobic or inherently malicious or whatever. Most of the creatives I've talked about here, I really respect. In fact, I think the vast majority of these texts are super cool and well made. That's why I watched them to begin with. I didn't make this video to hate on people who might have made a genuine effort to represent an underrepresented group. In fact, I think it's awesome that they tried. And hey, this is important. If you are an asexual person who identified with or liked any of the representation I mentioned in this video, that's totally valid. I think it's awesome if you are able to see yourself in any of these characters. That's what representation is all about. I don't represent everyone. These are my opinions. No monoliths and all that jazz. But there are undeniably problems with the ways that asexuality is seen in modern society, and that leaks into the ways that these characters are portrayed. And despite a lot of people making the effort to try and represent us, I do think there is an underlying feeling that aromantic and asexual people aren't as important as other groups in the queer community. We're 6 letters down the acronym, and even within queer works of art, asexual and aromantic people are so often pushed to the side and tokenized. And these are hard ideas to combat, not because they hold any merit, but because they're so powerful and comfortably lodged in society. How are you going to convince your average shipper to try and incorporate and respect aromantic or asexual ideas? How are you going to convince your average Stephen Moffat that we're interesting, that we aren't boring nerdy prudes, that we have real and important stories to tell that are worth telling? I don't know. All I know is that we do. We have significant and important stories to tell. I'll say it, the queer community needs us. Our very existence challenges societal ideas that are harmful to not just aromantic or asexual people, but to everyone. The idea that sex and romance are integral to the value of a person, the idea that a life without these two things is a life without living, hurts everyone. And because we are the people who are affected by it the most, we are the people who are most likely to call it out. The world needs us. They need our stories. And even if they didn't, aren't they still worth telling? At the end of the day, we're people, like anyone else. And so to any creatives watching, make asexual art. Make aromantic art. Make an asexual OC. Make that ship queer platonic. Learn about who we are and don't be afraid to write stories about us. I know I spent a buttload of time critiquing ace representation, but it's okay if they're not perfect at first. What's important is to make an effort. After all, any queer person should know how it feels to not be seen. And if there's anything to take away from this video, is that if we want any other asexual characters in Lackadaisy that aren't Mordecai, I think Rocky would be really funny. Come on, Lackadaisy, I believe in you. Make him asexual. You can do it!